If you accidentally touch a burning hot stove, uh, your hand pulls away violently before your brain even registers that you're in pain.
Right, it's basically instant.
Yeah, totally instant. And your brain didn't save your skin in that moment. A 16-inch string of delicate tissue running down your back did.
Which is something we almost never think about.
Exactly. Usually when we think about our nervous system, the brain gets all the glory, It's the CEO, the grand architect, the seat of consciousness.
And the spinal cord is just kind of an afterthought.
Right. If we think about it at all, we tend to imagine it as just a simple bundle of wires, like a passive biological extension cord just waiting for the brain's orders.
Just relaying messages back and forth.
But the stack of anatomical and physiological research notes we are looking at today for this deep dive paints a completely different picture. We are looking at the most sophisticated information highway in the known universe.
It really is. The complexity is just staggering.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to completely reshape how you view your own body's central relay. We want to move from seeing it as a simple cable to understanding it as an active, highly intelligent processing center.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer physical reality of the spinal cord is pretty mind-blowing.
The physical dimensions alone usually catch people off guard, right away. When you hear spinal cord, you might picture something thick and robust.
Like a heavy-duty rope or something.
Exactly, like a thick maritime rope. But in an adult, it's roughly 16 to 18 inches long, and it's only about as thick as your index finger.
Wait, a finger?
Yeah, we're talking 1 to 1.5 centimeters in diameter.
That is incredibly tiny. That tiny, fragile cylinder is carrying essentially every single signal that lets you feel the world and move your body through it.
It's doing all the heavy lifting in a very small package.
Unbelievable. But I want to clear up a major misconception right away, because people often use the word spine and spinal cord interchangeably. And looking at the anatomy notes, they are very different structures. Right, they are intimately connected but completely distinct.
The spine is the bony fortress, right? The stack of 33 vertebrae from your neck down to your tailbone. The spinal cord is the soft nervous tissue running through the hollow canal inside those bones.
Exactly. You can injure the bony spine, like getting a fracture from a bad fall, without actually damaging the cord itself.
No, that makes sense.
Though in major trauma, the two are obviously closely linked. Where the anatomy gets truly strange, however, is when you look at where the cord actually ends.
I noticed that in the diagrams. It doesn't go all the way down.
It doesn't.
It starts up at the base of the brainstem, but in adults, it tapers off surprisingly high up. It ends in a cone shape called the conus medullaris, around your first or second lumbar vertebra.
Basically just below your rib cage.
Right, which leaves a massive amount of empty bony real estate below it.
But it doesn't start out that way. When you're a developing fetus, and even as a newborn baby, your spinal cord extends much farther down, filling that whole canal.
So what happens? Does it shrink?
No, it's a biological quirk as you grow into childhood. Your bones just grow much faster than your nervous tissue.
Ah, so the vertebral column outpaces it.
Exactly. So the cord essentially gets pulled upward, or it ascends relative to the bones as you get taller.
That means the bottom of your spinal canal isn't holding the solid core anymore? The diagrams show this space filled with a huge bundle of loose nerve roots dangling downward.
Yeah, and the early anatomists looked at it and thought it looked exactly like a horse's tail.
Hence the name. The notes say they named it the cauda equina, which is literally Latin for horse's tail.
It's very literal. Plus, there's this thin, fibrous strand called the filum terminale, anchoring the whole thing down to your tailbone.
Presumably so the cord doesn't just snap up like a rubber band when you bend over.
Yeah, exactly. It provides necessary tension. It's a remarkably practical piece of biological engineering. But the shift in our physical understanding of the cord pales in comparison to the shift in our functional understanding of it.
Like we mentioned at the start.
Right, 19th century physiologists really did treat it as a passive cable.
The assumption was that the brain did all the thinking and the cord just blindly relayed the mail. So the old view is that the spinal cord is like a simple extension cord plugging the body into the brain. But based on these modern notes, is it more accurate to say it's like a smart home hub?
That's a great way to frame it.
Like a local device that can make its own decisions without having to ping the main Wi-Fi router upstairs every single time.
What's fascinating here is that the spinal cord is indeed a semi-autonomous processor. It contains local circuits called central pattern generators.
Central pattern generator.
Right. These are clusters of neurons capable of producing coordinated rhythmic movement patterns. Think of the complex mechanical sequence of walking.
Okay.
It can coordinate that without any direct command from the brain at all.
Wow. It's literally doing the math on its own.
Furthermore, it has its own form of use-dependent plasticity, meaning, just like the brain, the spinal cord can literally change and adapt its own internal wiring based on how it's used.
So it learns.
It does. This active plasticity fundamentally alters how we approach spinal injuries today, because we're no longer just trying to reconnect a dumb wire. We are dealing with a smart processor that possesses the ability to learn.
Which is incredible. But it makes me wonder, if it's this complex smart hub, how did early doctors ever figure out the wiring rules in the first place?
It is a very messy process.
Yeah. If we rewind from modern anatomy back to the history of this discovery, the sources paint a pretty brutal picture. Systematic interest goes all the way back to the 2nd century CE with Galen of Pergamon.
Galen was a fascinating figure. He served as a physician to Roman gladiators and eventually to the Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
So he saw a lot of injuries.
A tremendous amount. He had a front row seat to severe bodily trauma.
Yeah.
To figure out how the body functioned under the hood, Galen performed transection experiments on live pigs.
Ugh, to put it mildly.
Yeah, he would cut the spinal cord at different vertebral levels and observe exactly which physical functions were lost below each specific cut.
Right, and he figured out that higher damage equals more widespread paralysis. But the notes say he also deduced that the cord carried distinct, separate pathways for sensation and movement.
In the 2nd century.
Exactly. In the 2nd century, the guy didn't know what a neuron was, he didn't know about electrical signaling, and yet he's deducing one-way traffic rules in the nervous system just by observing what stops working.
It was an extraordinary leap of logic for antiquity. But the truly modern, mechanistic understanding of the cord's architecture didn't arrive until the early 19th century.
Right.
And it came through one of the most bitter priority disputes in the history of science. This was between a Scottish anatomist named Sir Charles Bell and a French physiologist, François Magendie.
Ah, the discovery of the Bell-Magendie law.
Exactly.
The notes define this as the fundamental rule that the nerve roots on the back of the spinal cord, the dorsal roots, carry sensory information into the body, and the roots on the front, the ventral roots, carry motor commands out to the muscles.
That's the basic blueprint.
The text uses the terms afferent and efferent signals, which honestly always trips me up.
An easy way to remember it is A for arrive, E for exit.
A for arrive, E for exit.
Okay. Afferent signals are arriving at the cord with sensory data. Efferent signals are exiting the cord with motor commands for your muscles.
Got it. But looking at these historical sources, I really have to push back on the name of this law.
How so?
Well, Bell made a vague, semi-accurate guess in a private pamphlet in 1811, right? And he got some of the functional details wrong.
You did, yes.
Magendie actually did the hard, rigorous live animal experiments in 1822 to firmly prove it. But they share the hyphenated name. Isn't that just a lucky guess stealing half the credit from the scientists who did the actual work?
I want the listener to picture this dynamic for a moment. Imagine you were working in a highly competitive field today, and you published definitive, reproducible proof of a groundbreaking concept.
You'd be thrilled.
Right. And suddenly, someone pulls out an obscure, privately circulated memo from a decade ago, claiming they had the idea first. Even if their details were muddy, you would be furious.
Exactly.
Magendie was meticulous. He severed the dorsal roots of live animals and proved that sensation was lost while movement remained. Then he severed the ventral roots and showed the exact reverse.
That is clear, reproducible proof.
It's a perfect case study in how scientific credit is fiercely contested. But whoever you want to give the lion's share of the credit to, Magendie's proof of functionally specialized one-way pathways was revolutionary.
Because before this, what did they think?
Before this, people thought there was just some generic nerve force sloshing around the body in all directions. Proving that there are distinct inbound and outbound lanes launched the entire field of modern experimental neurophysiology.
So we have these one-way nerve roots coming into the cord. Here's where it gets really interesting. If we zoom inside the cord to trace where those incoming sensory signals actually go, the architectural layout is totally inverted from the brain.
Yes, the anatomy completely flips. If you take a cross-section of the spinal cord, you'll see a core of gray matter shaped like a butterfly, or the letter H right in the center.
Right in the middle.
And that gray matter is primarily made up of the cell bodies of neurons, the processing centers. Surrounding that butterfly on the outside is a thick rim of white matter.
And the white matter gets its color from myelin, the fatty insulation wrapping the cables.
Exactly.
So the white matter is the cabling running up and down the spine. Up in the brain, the processing gray matter is on the outside, and the white matter cables are on the inside. Down in the cord, it's flipped.
It's entirely backward from the brain.
And within that outer rim of white matter, the notes highlight two crucial ascending highways going up to the brain. You've got the dorsal column running up the back of the cord,
The dorsal column carries fine touch, vibration, and proprioception.
which is that sixth sense of knowing where your limbs are in space even with your eyes closed.
Right, your spatial awareness. Then you have the spinal thalamic tract, which runs up a different, more central lateral route. That one carries pain and temperature information.
And these two highways handle their traffic very differently, which leads to a wild medical phenomenon called Brown-Séquard syndrome, discovered in 1850.
It's a classic neurological case.
If someone's spinal cord is damaged on just one side, say from a tumor, they develop a bizarre asymmetric symptom profile. On the exact same side of their body as the injury, they lose their sense of fine touch and limb awareness.
Right.
But on the opposite side of their body, they lose their ability to feel pain and temperature.
To a layman, it seems entirely counterintuitive. Why would it be split like that?
Yeah.
But it makes perfect sense once you map out the specific wiring of those two highways.
Let me see if I can visualize this based on the diagrams. It's
Yeah.
almost like having a northbound local train and an express train on completely different tracks.
Oh, okay, I like that.
The dorsal column, the touch pathway, is the local train. It enters the cord and stays on that exact same side all the way up until it hits the brainstem and then it crosses over.
Right.
But the pain pathway, the spinothalamic tract, is the express train. The second it enters the spinal cord, it immediately crosses over to the opposite side of the cord before heading up to the brain.
So a breakdown on the local track on the left side of the cord stops touch signals from the left side of the body.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop the express train carrying pain signals from the right side of the body, because that train already crossed over to the left track before heading up.
That explains why the symptoms are split. Brown-Séquard syndrome is a direct bedside proof that the cord's two major sensory highways are physically separate pathways, not just one blended channel.
It's all highly organized traffic.
But not all traffic goes all the way up to the brain, right? Sometimes the spinal cord just talks over completely. The notes highlight Sir Charles Sherrington, who won the Nobel Prize in 1932, for proving that the cord organizes complex behaviors all on its own.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Sherrington's work on reflexes fundamentally reframed biology. He actually coined the term synapse.
Really?
He did. He demonstrated that the cord isn't merely relaying signals, it's integrating them. It weighs incoming data and makes a rapid decision.
The classic example is the knee-jerk reflex. When a doctor taps just below your kneecap with a rubber hammer, your leg involuntarily kicks out.
Exactly.
The text calls this a monosynaptic reflex arc. But how does my leg kick before I even feel the tap?
Because it is the absolute simplest circuit in your body. Monosynaptic means a singular synapse, one connection.
Wow, just one.
Yep. The doctor's tap stretches your quadriceps muscle slightly. A sensory neuron detects that stretch, shoots a signal directly into your spinal cord, and synapses immediately, with almost zero delay onto a motor neuron.
And
That motor neuron fires, sends a signal back to the same muscle, and your leg kicks. The entire loop of sense, decide, and act happens inside the spinal cord in mere milliseconds.
completely skipping the brain.
The brain is totally bypassed. You only know your leg kicked because a separate, slower report gets sent up the dorsal column to your brain after the fact.
The brain is just getting a status update, not issuing a command.
Right. The brilliance of the reflex arc is that it serves as a general biological design template for survival. Take a slightly more complex one, the withdrawal reflex, like the hot stove example we started with.
Oh, yeah.
You need to pull your hand away instantly, much faster than the time it would take for the signal to reach your brain, for your brain to process the danger, and send a motor command back down.
Yeah, if you wait for the brain's permission, your hand is already burned. So the spinal cord handles it. But the notes say this is polysynaptic, it involves inner neurons, and it relies on something called reciprocal inhibition.
Think about the physics of moving your arm. When the sensory pain signal from the stove hits the spinal cord, the cord sends a command to your flexor muscles to contract and pull your hand away.
Right, to yank it back.
But your arm also has extensor muscles that do the exact opposite. They push. If both flexors and extensors fire at once, your arm locks up.
Oh, so the cord doesn't just tell the pulling muscles to work. It actively sends a silencing signal to the pushing muscles on the opposite side of the arm so they don't fight against the withdrawal.
Exactly. It manages that entire coordinated muscle symphony in milliseconds, making snap decisions to protect you. And this idea of the cord actively managing and editing information sets up one of the most fascinating debates in the source material.
How the spinal cord handles pain.
Precisely.
For most of the 20th century, doctors modeled pain as a direct, linear signal, like an old telephone wire. You damage tissue, a pain receptor fires a signal straight up the cord to the brain.
The more damage, the louder the signal.
Right, more damage equals a louder ring on the telephone, and you feel more pain. Simple. But in 1965, a psychologist named Ronald Melzack and a physiologist named Patrick Wall published something called the gate control theory of pain.
Which completely overturned that linear telephone wire model.
They proposed that the spinal cord has a physiological gate in a region called the dorsal horn. And this gate can amplify or suppress pain signals before they ever leave the spinal cord.
It acts as a filter.
Yeah, it makes this decision based on competing incoming signals like touch, and also based on descending signals coming down from the brain. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Is the spinal cord basically acting like a bouncer at a nightclub?
That is a highly accurate way to look at it.
Like, it lets the touch signals inside, but makes the pain signals wait outside in line if the club is getting too full.
Think about your own lived experience. If you bump your knee hard on a table, what is your immediate automatic instinct?
I rub it.
Right. Under the old linear telephone model, rubbing it shouldn't help at all. You're just adding more physical sensation to an already painful area.
Which would make it worse, theoretically.
But under gate control theory, by rubbing the knee, you are flooding the spinal cord with non-painful touch signals via that local train we talked about. Those touch signals crowd the nightclub, so to speak, and physically close the neurological gate on the pain signals.
So the pain literally cannot get through to the brain as easily.
Exactly.
It's wild that rubbing a bumped knee is actually a scientifically validated neurological hack.
It really is. And the brain itself can send signals down to close that gate based on your emotional state or stress levels. It's why athletes sometimes don't feel a severe bone fracture until the game is over.
The adrenaline and focus.
Yeah, their brain is telling the spinal cord to keep the pain gate shut so they can survive the immediate situation. While the mechanical details of Melzack and Wall's theory have been refined over the decades, the core concept that the spinal cord actively edits reality is the direct ancestor of modern pain treatments.
Like what kind of treatments?
Things like 10NS units, those little electrical pads you can put on a sore back, or implantable spinal cord stimulators. They all work by leveraging this exact gate mechanism, flooding the cord with alternate signals to block chronic pain.
The cord is literally editing our reality. But for all its brilliance in managing traffic and blocking pain, there is a devastating roadblock when it comes to the spinal cord. Because what happens when the highway itself is damaged?
Yeah, that brings up the intense debate around regeneration.
Which is a crucial defining distinction between the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which encompasses all the nerves branching out to your limbs.
Right, they heal very differently.
If I slice my finger and sever a nerve part of the peripheral nervous system, given enough time and the right surgical conditions, it can often regrow and heal. But the mammalian central nervous system has an extremely limited capacity for self-repair.
For a long time, the notes say doctors thought it was just a fixed biological law.
The spinal cord simply cannot regenerate.
But research since the 1980s has entirely reframed this pessimistic view. We now understand that the cord's poor regeneration isn't simply because it lacks the intrinsic machinery to grow.
Then what is it?
It is actively suppressed by its own environment. There are specific myelin-associated inhibitory proteins in the central nervous system that act like chemical stop signs, literally blocking axon regrowth.
Wow.
Furthermore, when the cord is injured, astrocytes rush in and form a dense glial scar.
The notes describe that scar as both a physical and chemical barrier. So it's not that the bridge can't be rebuilt, it's as if someone poured thick concrete over the broken road, and the body's own chemical signals are actively protesting the rebuild.
That is the tragedy of spinal cord trauma. Overcoming those inhibitory stop signs and dissolving that concrete scar is a massive, high-stakes research frontier right now.
The notes mention a closely watched embryonic stem cell trial by Geron Corporation in 2010 that attempted to jumpstart this repair process.
It was a very big deal at the time.
Though it was ultimately discontinued due to complexities, the fundamental code of regeneration hasn't been fully cracked yet.
No, it hasn't. And because regeneration is so incredibly difficult, understanding the exact nature of an injury is critical. And that leads to a really common misconception we need to clear up.
Bridges.
The idea that any spinal cord injury means instant total paralysis from the neck down. Injury severity is highly variable. Clinicians evaluate it based heavily on two factors: the completeness of the injury and the specific vertebral level of the injury.
Right, because of where different nerves exit the highway. An injury really high up in the neck, around the C3 to C5 vertebrae, is incredibly dangerous because it disrupts the phrenic nerve.
Which is vital for survival.
Yeah, I'm reading here that the phrenic nerve is what drives your diaphragm, so an injury there stops you from being able to breathe on your own. But injuries lower down leave the arms functioning, or incomplete injuries where some pathways are spared leave patients with substantial preserved function below the injury.
Clinicians use the ASIA impairment scale to formally grade this. It's a way to measure whether the bridge is completely collapsed or if one lane of traffic is still miraculously open.
And distinguishing between complete and incomplete is vital.
Right, because of what we could attempt to do with those spared surviving pathways.
Finding those tiny spared pathways is what led to the incredible case of Rob Summers in 2011. This case completely reshaped spinal cord injury research.
It was a true breakthrough.
Rob Summers was a young man who had a motor-complete spinal cord injury. No voluntary movement signals could get past the injury site. He couldn't move his legs at all. But researchers Susan Harkema and V. Reggie Edgerton implanted an epidural stimulator below his injury site, delivering continuous electrical stimulation to his lower spinal cord.
And the results were stunning.
After months of this, he regained the ability to voluntarily move his legs, stand, and bear his own weight.
The critical thing to understand here is that the electrical stimulation did not regenerate his severed spinal cord. It did not rebuild the broken bridge.
Wait, I mean, if it didn't fix the bridge, then how on earth did he stand up?
It goes all the way back to what we discussed at the very beginning, the central pattern generators.
The smart hub?
Yes, the smart hub circuits in his lower spinal cord were still perfectly intact below the injury site. But because of the damage above, they weren't getting enough baseline juice from the brain to turn on.
They were just dormant.
Exactly. The epidural stimulation provided a constant baseline hum of electricity. It primed the pump of those intact circuits, lowering their threshold for activation.
Oh, so the circuits became hypersensitive.
Once they were primed, they were finally able to hear the extremely faint residual signals that were still trickling down from his brain through a few microscopically spared nerve fibers that survived the initial trauma.
Wow. It just turned the volume up so the smart hub could hear the brain's whisper again.
That's a perfect analogy.
That single breakthrough has led to massive, ongoing trials for epidural stimulation, offering real hope where there previously was absolutely none.
It's changing the landscape of what's possible.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating the world today? Even if you never experience a spinal trauma, spinal cord physiology touches your life constantly and often invisibly.
Every single day. If you've ever known someone with sciatica, that shooting pain down the back of the leg is caused by a herniated disc physically pressing on a specific spinal nerve root as it exits the bony spine.
Which is why the pain radiates.
Right. Clinicians actually map the human body using something called dermatomes. These are specific strips of skin served by specific spinal nerves. By testing a dermatome map, a doctor can touch your leg, find where it's numb, and deduce exactly which vertebral level in your back is injured.
The body is entirely mapped out, and beyond mechanical injuries or diseases like multiple sclerosis, the physical anatomy of the cord dictates everyday medical procedures. Think back to that anatomical quirk we mentioned at the start, where the spinal cord actually ends at the L1, L2 vertebrae.
That quirk is incredibly useful because the solid cord ends there, but the protective fluid sac continues down. It provides a safe access door for medicine.
For things like an epidural.
Exactly. Doctors can safely insert a needle below the cord at the L3, L4 level to administer an epidural during childbirth or to perform a lumbar puncture to test for meningitis.
They can access the central nervous system's fluid without any risk of piercing the delicate nervous tissue itself.
It's just brilliant.
The human body is just relentlessly practical.
It is. And as we wrap up, there is one detail hidden in the sources that I think fundamentally shifts how we view ourselves.
What's that?
The spinal cord isn't just managing our limbs, our reflexes, and our pain. It also houses the cell bodies for a huge portion of the autonomic nervous system.
The autonomic system.
Yes. The sympathetic chain, which runs right alongside the thoracic and lumbar cord, is intimately linked to the unconscious control of your heart rate, your digestion, and your blood pressure.
The background processes of keeping you alive.
Exactly. This raises an important question. If this 16-inch cylinder of tissue in our back is not just a passive wire, but an active, intelligent processor that makes physical decisions for us, edits the pain we feel, and controls the life-sustaining rhythms of our internal organs, all without our conscious input.
Right.
How much of what we consider to be our fundamental self isn't actually up there in our brain at all? How much of you is actually humming along on autopilot, making choices in the dark tunnel of your spine?
That is wild to think about. Next time your back aches, you might want to show that biological smart hub a little more respect. It's doing a lot more heavy lifting than you think.